Thanks, Mr. Zaffini. It's been a lot of fun being back at Veritas, some old teachers, Mr. Novak and Mr. Zaffini in particular. I remember when my parents first mentioned Veritas Academy, I think it was during my 5th grade year, and the only thing that came to mind was some kind of British boarding school. I had no real conception of what a classical school would be. Something reminiscent of Another Brick in the Wall by Pink Floyd. As it turned out, I ended up coming to Veritas despite my best efforts, and it turned out not to be quite as terrible as I expected. There were no British accents and no cruel and unusual punishments. In fact, everything seemed relatively normal. Of course, there were 2 notable exceptions. The first was our uniforms. Back then it was blue pants and white shirts. Those were your options. And my pants, for some reason, always seemed to be a couple inches too short. So yeah, I didn't particularly enjoy those. And the other exception was Latin. I think Latin has been perhaps the most maligned subject taught in schools. So I'm here partially in its defense. But even someone as great an orator as Winston Churchill was not sure that it was such a good idea for everyone, and I found some interesting thoughts from him on the matter. He described how he was told when he went to a school to sit in a room by himself for 30 minutes when he first arrived, and he was given a Latin paradigm and told to memorize it. And after this experience, he writes, in due course the master returned. Have you learnt it, he asked. I think I can say it, sir, I replied, and I gabbled it off. He seemed so satisfied with this that I was emboldened to ask a question. What does it mean, sir? It means what it says. Mensa, a table. Mensa is a noun of the first declension. There are 5 declensions. You have learned the singular of the first declension. But, I repeated, what does it mean? Mensa means a table, he answered. And why does mensa also mean O table, I inquired, and what does O table mean? Mensa, O table, is the vocative case, he replied. But why O table, I persisted in genuine curiosity. O table, you would use that in addressing a table, in invoking a table. And then seeing he was not carrying me with him, he would use it in speaking to a table. But I never do, I blurted out in honest. If you are impertinent, you will be punished, and punished, let me tell you, very severely, was his conclusive rejoinder. Such was my first introduction to the classics from which I've been told many of our cleverest men have derived so much solace and profit. Instead of Latin, Churchill recommended learning English. He described his experience in the lowest form of his school, where the students were not considered intelligent enough to study Greek or Latin. In this form, their teacher, Mr. Somerville, constantly drilled them not in Greek and Latin verbs, but in the English language itself. Churchill writes, as I remained in the 3rd form, 3 times as long as anyone else, I had 3 times as much of it. I learned it thoroughly, thus I got into my bones the essential structure of the ordinary British sentence, which is a noble thing. Naturally, I am biased in favor of boys learning English. I would make them all learn English, and then I would let the clever ones learn Latin as an honor and Greek as a treat. But the only thing I would whip them for is not knowing English. I would whip them hard for that. So, why do we study Latin at Veritas? There are, in fact, many reasons, but I don't want to tell you tonight about the enjoyment of learning to read Homer or Virgil in their original languages, or the benefits of studying New Testament Greek. I don't want to tell you how to increase your vocabulary by learning Latin roots, or how to recognize scientific terminology more quickly. Instead, I want to agree with Churchill and say that the only thing for which students should have no excuse is not knowing English. Certainly, as Churchill exemplifies, English can be learned well without any Greek or Latin. But I'd like also to suggest that one of the best ways to learn English is by learning Latin. While any language might help students understand English more clearly, Latin along with Greek is unique. The structure of Latin makes explicit the grammatical and syntactical categories which in English are only implied. For instance, someone who has only learned languages without case endings, it can be very difficult to understand the exact difference between who and whom, I and me, or we and us. Learning that in Latin, every word has a similar variety of forms suddenly puts these linguistic leftovers in a larger context. A related example is that because of Latin's case endings, Latin sentences need not have the fixed order of English, in which the subject is followed by the verb, which is followed by the object. Learning to separate the grammar from the word order allows students to understand the categories of grammar much more clearly. Finally, Latin offers the cultural and literary benefits that I mentioned above, which few other languages can provide. These combined advantages of Latin ought to make it a required class for anyone wanting to educate their children classically at a place like Veritas. If the goal of classical education is in fact to produce students who can think clearly and communicate effectively amidst the complexities of the world, then knowing English and knowing it well is essential. And if we must know English, there are a few better things we can do than to study Latin.